Keir Starmer, though, out of Liverpool, off to Copenhagen to a big meeting of European leaders, carrying on with a tough message about cracking down further on the rights of asylum seekers to bring family here to the UK, doubling down on an argument he's picked all week with Nigel Farage about who's right and wrong, whether it's racist to take the approach Reform has been saying on asylum seeking. So, to start with, at the end of the week, did Keir Starmer win the argument politically within the conference and in the country versus Reform?
Well, they're two separate things, isn't there? I mean, the country, clearly there's a way to go, and we're going to be having that fight between now and the next general election. But as you well know, Ed, he went into the conference on what we would say in Scotland on a bit of a sugary peg in terms of, you know, a lot of chatter of division.
Sugary peg?
Sugary peg. It means he went in with a bit of trouble, right? In terms
a bit?
Yes, exactly. I'm telling you. Yeah. Well, quite a lot, right?
A very sugary peg.
Very sugary peg, right? He goes in, very difficult pose. You know, you've got a spectre of Andy Burnham. And I would say when we arrived on the Saturday, the mood was really, really febrile. You know what it's like. It's the real chatter happens in the bars and the parties and the fringes at night where everybody does kind of say what they're sort of thinking. I would say that what he did in his speech is that he sort of won the conference and, you know, people sort of left feeling much more positive. So I think that has done some work with him, certainly sort of within the party. But you're right, the big question, you know, conferences are not just about playing to the hall. He did have to play to the hall on this occasion, but now he's got to, the big job for him is he's got to take a bigger message to the public on all of these issues.
Sure.
Kwasi, do you think he did that?
It was an odd conference. I mean, I was looking at it from, well, basically on television.
It's an interested observer on the outside.
What I found really odd, I think Aisha's right. I think he consolidated and settled the nerves within the hall, within the party. Because obviously you had Angela Rayner and then Peter Mandelson, and it was all looking quite wobbly. And I think he did the job of saying, you know, I'm the leader, let's all rally around me, essentially. The problem was he kept talking about Nigel Farage. And I haven't seen anything like it. I haven't seen a Prime Minister at a party conference talk about even the leader of the opposition, let alone the leader of a party with 5 MPs. And I think that's
not quite true, because you do attack. I mean, you do
not on a personal level, very rare.
One of his best speeches was attacking Liz Truss.
Yeah, but the trouble is, Aisha, as Kwasi says, he literally spent a huge chunk of his speech.
That's right.
And all the interviews afterwards, including with us on this programme, saying this is now a straight split politically between Labour and Reform.
That's exactly right.
And gave a massive open goal to Nigel Farage to then be on screen with union flags behind him, giving a sort of alternative
and he's the Prime Minister.
Leader approach.
And he is the Prime Minister. I mean, when he was attacking Truss and all the other people, he was the leader of the opposition. So they're more senior and he's attacking them. He's now the Prime Minister. He's the leader of this country. And the point of conference, yes, it's to consolidate your base, but also you've got to project a vision to the country. But it goes to the
point Aisha just made, which was going into this, he was massively under pressure. The one thing he knew in his speech on Tuesday is a emotional, angry attack on Nigel Farage was going to make the hall cheer and cheer and cheer. And he did that because he needed that internally because he was in trouble.
That's right.
The question is, does it help him in the country or not? I don't know if I know what the answer to that is.
Well, I don't think we are going to know the answer to that until we get to the next general election. But look...
Or the May local election.
Well, yes, actually, the May local election. That's a fair point. That is a fair point. Look, the reality is, as much as we're, you know, decrying that he talked about Nigel Farage, we in the media, and of course I'm a radio presenter to myself, we do spend a lot of the time, programmes like yours, my programme, other programmes, we are all obsessed with reform because it's a really interesting political story. You go out and about, you know, I've been doing lots of things in various things. People are talking about reform and people are talking about immigration. They're talking about race. That is the sort of dominant conversation.
Although Ed Davey the week before was attacking the BBC for talking about reform
and then he
too
talked,
much.
Then he talked
Keir
about
Starmer,
it.
I mean, has encouraged everybody to talk about
But then
reform.
Ed Davey did talk about Nigel Farage. Look, there is the world as you would like it to be, which is, oh, let's not give Nigel Farage any, like, oxygen. Then there's the world as it is. If you look objectively in politics right now, who is the party that is kind of shooting up and everyone's talking about? It's reform. Now, I think if Keir Starmer had not talked about that, people have been like, oh, and he's had this criticism as well, saying, oh, he's a bit scared of Nigel Farage or he doesn't want to take him on. well, he's done that now. Now people are going to criticise him. Like, he's going to get criticised whatever he does. Right? If he didn't talk about Farage, he'd be criticised.
The astonishing thing was that quasi the Tories, the Conservatives, who are supposed to be the main opposition,
it's
were
scary.
barely mentioned.
Yeah, I mean,
going into their conference this weekend, I don't know if you're going, but I mean, it's a huge struggle for Kemi Badenoch to get any airtime at all.
To get in as part of the conversation. And I think the Prime Minister deliberately has done that. He said it's between decent Labour and essentially racist reform. That's how he's characterising it. And a lot of Conservative voters, if they have to face that choice, a lot of them are going to say, actually, if I have to choose between Labour and reform, I'm going to vote for reform. And that's where I think the danger strategically is for the PM. The interesting thing is, I noticed, and it's not scientific, the cheer he got when he talked about Palestine was deafening. That, for me, was one of the things I learned, was that was an issue which he could rally his base around. And I think, as you said, he did it that successfully at the conference.
I just also want to say, look, there was a little bit of a narrative that the only thing he talked about was that, I think it's a bit unfair because at the beginning he was introduced by Margaret Aspinall, who's done brilliant work on Hillsborough, and the first part of his speech was talking about this kind of new sort of Hillsborough law. So I think sometimes when we talk, and I'm probably guilty of this as a media person as well. We only say that he talks about one thing. That's not quite sort of true. But look, the big conversations we are having are around. We've had so many discussions. Kwasi will do them. I do them. You guys talk about it. The dominant question in British politics now is Nigel Farage going to be Prime Minister? And that is a sort of reality. So I think, in a way, he is right to take the fight to Nigel Farage.
I would say the dominant question in British society right now is how do we improve people's living standards? And I'm not sure that the Prime Minister set out a convincing plan and proposal for how he's going to improve the cost of living crisis.
If you look at the polling on issues, immigration has crept from quite a low place only 5 or 6 years ago.
Quasi, one of the reasons that immigration becomes a big issue is because people feel like they don't have enough.
I agree.
And they feel like, if I don't have enough, who's getting all the state money? And therefore, immigrants, unfortunately, in an immigration system, gets a sort of disproportionate focus. I just wonder why the Prime Minister didn't set out a really compelling economic vision.
Honestly, right, and I'm a member of the media as well, so I'm just being really honest. Very rarely do we have big discussions, like when you're thinking about your debates for the day, when I'm doing my running order for my show, very rarely go, let's have a big debate about how to improve the living conditions in this country.
I did an interview with the Prime Minister.
We will have debates
about why the bills for everybody are going up, and he just couldn't.
But we will also have big debates going. Documentaries are being done about it now. When you look at the polls, and the media is also driven by polls, there are all these massive polls coming out. We had 2 of these big polls dropping just before conference, saying that Labour's likely to drop below 100. Nigel Farage will get a majority of 96. I take your point, but the media, and I include myself in this, we are also obsessed with this rise of the turquoise tide.
But Aisha, on Friday, the day before the conference, Keir Starmer has a choice. His message is ID cards to tackle illegal immigration. He goes on the Laura Kuenssberg's programme on Sunday. His news story is to use the word racist, whether he meant that or not.
He didn't. She asked him that question. Be very careful about the facts on this.
I think that wasn't
She asked him.
I don't think that was control.
That was not planned, Ed.
You're saying the Prime Minister, on his main interview of the year, makes a mistake and delivers up for the BBC a story he didn't intended by using the word racist.
I don't think he intended. And you know,
you've
been in those positions. When you do interviews, and you say something. I do not think, honestly, and you know this because you know people in the cabinet very, very closely. The idea that they'd be sitting there going, right, the media strategy is to go out and use the R word. I don't think that's the case.
Look, I mean, if that is the case, that is staggeringly incompetent. To use that word in that way, look, I want to believe he chose it, because if he didn't, I mean, that is terrible.
But the way you're
every day over those 4 days, they chose to make the fight. They wanted the media story daily to be reform. That was their choice. It wasn't the media doing it to them.
It's a choice to have a fight about reform. Yeah. I don't think it's accurate for you to say that he went on and he volunteered up the word racist. He got asked about that.
I think of the 2 alternatives, which is the Prime Minister of our country made a mistake in the main interview of the year,
no, he
or he
intended the question.
No, but he didn't have to say that Nigel Farage and his party is racist.
Nobody else said that
directly. You never say that.
But Ed, look,
he must have chosen to say that.
He is now in a fight with this person, right? And I think if he'd been dancing around, we would be sitting here today having the conversation and you would be saying to me ferociously, Aisha, he's weak. He's too scared to talk about Nigel Farage. He's ignoring the elephant in the room.
I think that a lot of people watching might have thought, where's the vision?
So what's happened, I think, is that Labour are in a blind panic about the actual polls. And what they've worked out is that the only way, the biggest obstacle for them to get back is Nigel Farage. So they've taken a corporate decision, and it's not just the Prime Minister, there'll be special advisors, there'll be a whole bunch of people in Downing Street saying, our job is to essentially put him back in his box, go after him, and then we can get re-elected that way. That's the calculation they've made, and that's why they're going on about him constantly. I personally don't think it's going to work, but that's, I think, the decision they've made.
But they're doubling down on it again today, aren't they? I mean, the story today is straight out of the conference. Keir Starmer has gone to Copenhagen and he's taking the argument again back to asylum, reform of the ECHR, restricting the right of asylum seekers to bring family members. I mean, it's clearly a strategy to be on this agenda, not to be on the economy or cost of living or those things.
But I think he has to do this, and this is quite uncomfortable territory for Labour, because, as Kwasi and I have both said, immigration is shooting up the political agenda.
People are talking about it.
You speak to even, not just Labour MPs, Conservative MPs I speak to who, held on to their seat. They say to me, every conversation, and this is happening the length and breadth of the country, every conversation that a lot of MPs are having, it's kind of overlaid by the question of immigration. And to your point, Susanna, about people saying, where's my money going? Everybody thinks, rightly or wrongly, that all the resources are heading towards either asylum hotels or the issue of immigration. So I think Keir Starmer is right to be focusing on this sort of edge. And actually, I think doing it in concert with other European leaders is the right thing to do.
You can do that.
We are going to have to try and change some of these
without
rules
being
and
personal,
legislation.
without making the whole fight about Farage. That's the thing that I'm questioning. Because you saw that in America with Trump. The Democrats' whole raison d'etre was that they weren't Trump. Their whole argument was that this guy is a very, very scary, terrible person.
And their supporters were a basket of deplorables.
They were deplorables, they were all of those things. And he won.
Yeah.
And that's why, having seen that, I'm not sure it's going to work. This sort of demonisation, if that's what it is, of Farage, is going to work. I'm not sure it is.
Well, let's have a look at this plan, then, that the Prime Minister is promoting, saying that the refugee system is unfair and not fit for purpose because it gives greater rights to migrants coming on small boats than to those who arrived legally or even British citizens. So asylum seekers are granted refugee status, given automatic permanent settlement in Britain after 5 years, with rare exceptions, and can bring family to join them immediately.
And rhetorically, he calls that a golden ticket.
He calls it a golden ticket, which is extraordinary. I had to double-check that was actually the Prime Minister's words. British citizens, meanwhile, who want to bring a foreign spouse to the UK have to meet a minimum income of £29,000 and provide stricter proof of their relationship. So it does look like a two-tier system.
I think, and you think he's right to tackle it. I think it does. I think having you just read that out, I think most people sitting at home listening to that will say, that doesn't seem right. And I think part of this immigration argument is that there is this perceived sense of unfairness, that some people who do really want to come to this country, it's really hard for them to get through and do it legally if they sort of play by the rules. Whereas if you do come on a small boat, and I understand that there may be reasons why you want to do that, once you sort of get here, it does feel like you've sort of fast-tracked a lot of those other hurdles that other people haven't.
The main point is that if you come and you get refugee status, you've got a whole bunch of rights that a lot of people who live in this country, who've lived here for generations, don't have. And this is where our old friend, the ECHR, comes in. Because, I think it's under Article 8 of the ECHR, you have essentially a right to family life, and judges are interpreting that.
I'm not sure it's right to say that they are rights that people who've lived here for generations don't have. It's right to say that it's a right which people who come here through a legal route don't have.
But the category, once you've got the refugee, you do have those rights. Now, I'm not saying, well, it's an open question whether people here have them or not.
A British citizen has those rights too.
No, but they can't just, as we've said, they can't just bring people in because of Article 8 of the ECHR.
Yes, they can. What you mean? They can't claim? Well, you know,
No,
I'm a
they
British
don't.
citizen. I have a foreign spouse, and I have a right to family life.
I don't think they
There are
do.
criteria
Whereas the
for that.
refugees, because of the ECHR,
that's
have
so
those rights.
interesting.
And that's where I think that there's unease about that.
And look, these are very, tricky and difficult policies. I think it is right that Keir Starmer... The other speech, which I thought was very, very good at Labour Party conference, was the debut from the new Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, who I think spoke in a very nuanced way about the need to sort of get the asylum and immigration system under control, and it did get under control under the sort of previous administration. She also talked about her own stories growing up. She said she had to keep a baseball bat under her dad's, shop in the corner shop because of the violence that they faced from the National Front. So I think she is somebody who does kind of understand the nuances in this. But also, we've talked a lot about, the framing around Nigel Farage. Remember, the policy of reform is to completely abolish indefinite leave to remain, which is incredibly upsetting and stressful for lots of people who've come to this country, they've worked really hard, they've paid their taxes, they're settled here, and they've got their kids going, Mum, Dad, are we going to still allow to be here?
But demonising whatever it is, trying to delegitimise Nigel Farage, but at the same time, it seems that they're adopting some of his policies. Not to that extent.
But
they're tough. The one time you're saying, he's a terrible racist and all of that, and then you're adopting a lot of his policy.
And do you think it's a racist policy?
I do think. Listen, I do think it's racist. But if you have been settled here, you've done everything right, you've played by the rules, you've got the paperwork. And then someone's come knocking the door going, right, we're deporting you. I'm sorry, I do think that's racist.
Well, it's not... I mean, to be fair to the reform policy, he's saying that they should reapply. So it's not someone knocking on the door saying you're out. It's saying, OK...
But that's how it will feel
and apply stricter criteria.
I'm just being fair and accurate
come on
that.
The whole thing is, right, if you are in this position, and we all know this, having ethnic minority sort of backgrounds, our parents worked really, really hard to come here, and you work really, really hard as an immigrant to get that point where you can just relax a bit and think, right, I'm here and I've done everything properly and I've got my paperwork and I'm here now. I'm settled in this country. I love this country. I can participate. The anxiety of you have to do it all over again. And as you say, Susanna, the criteria is getting narrowed and narrowed and narrowed, and that might mean you don't make the cut and you've got to go. That is incredibly stressful and that is unfair for people.
But the problem here, Aisha, is there's the policy debate and then there's the politics. And independent of the policy debate, and I agree that there's a big difference between what the government's saying about reforming leave to remain and what Reform are saying. The moment in a sentence, the Prime Minister, in the same sentence, has the word Nigel Farage or Reform and racist, that politically means it raises a whole series of questions about, well, are the voters racist? Are they inherently racist? Is their policy platform all racist? And the moment you use the phrase golden ticket about the way the asylum system works, it looks like... So you're now agreeing with the things which Nigel Farage has been saying for the last few years.
That's exactly my
the
point.
politics and the language is different from the policy. And he's chosen to take it into what I think people would conventionally have said was very dangerous territory. Because if you use the word racist against your opponent, I mean, Nigel Farage would have been so pleased at that moment.
But Nigel Farage is going to be pleased with anything. I think we're operating in this world right now where, like, there's a counterfactual, amazing speech that, Keir Starmer has done where we'd have been saying here going, well, that was... It's really difficult times at the moment. On the one hand, and by the way, I don't think this is this hard to get round. It is not racist to want to get control of immigration and borders. And by the way, many ethnic minority people want that to happen because it absolutely spiked out of control under the previous government. It completely... You just look at the graph, right? And actually, I think Nigel Farage is quite right to call it a Boris wave. So that it is not racist to want to do that. But it is, I think, racist when you single out particular groups of people and you are... I think the difference is, for people who have come to this country, they've worked hard, they've settled, they might have a different skin colour from you, they're good people, they've earned their right to be here, let them be. Then people coming over on small boats who... And I know it's difficult and they've had difficult time. They're saying that we have to change the rules because there is a perceived unfairness.
But this conversation makes the point, which is Keir Starmer is going to spend the whole time now between now and the local elections explaining what he does and doesn't think is racist about
Look, they've tried to do
reform
two
and Nigel
things.
He's going to be
Farage.
talking about immigration the whole
No,
time
but they've
between now and the
tried-
general election.
but
They've tried to
Racist
do
is
two
different.
things at the same time. They're trying to essentially say Nigel Farage is racist and you're trying to delegitimise him, while at the same time you're trying to deal with the issues that he's championing. And I think that's going to get very confusing for the election.
Shall we address this issue of a company linked to the Tory peer, Michelle Mone? Not sure how often you see her in the House of Lords, Aisha, has been ordered to pay the government almost £122 million back for breaching a contract to supply millions of surgical gowns
Isn't she currently on leave?
during the pandemic. The Department of Health and Social Care sued PPE MedPro at the High Court because of a breach of the deal. 25 million gowns it provided were faulty because they weren't sterile. This is a controversy that all stems from the COVID pandemic, of course, and the VIP lane. Where...
Well, look, I mean, I was in Cabinet at the time, or just after, and everyone was making decisions at high speed. We'd never seen the pandemic before, and these contracts were being given very quickly because there was a need. Now, I think with Michelle Mone, her company didn't fulfil their obligations under the contract. And frankly, the NHS were quite right to sue them. And they've won. And now they're going to have to give back £122 million.
The company, the day before the judgment, filed for administration.
Yeah, so it wasn't a success. It wasn't a sustainable company.
So does that mean that it's going to pay back any of the £122 million?
That's a very good question.
And where's the money gone?
Well, I mean, we see how she lives. I mean, she's got quite an extravagant lifestyle.
Yeah,
I don't know where the
But we can only speculate.
I mean, look, when you look back at that time and how horrific it was, and you look at all those nurses and doctors in this kind of completely shonky PPE, one of the biggest scandals of the last administration was this absolute corruption that was going around on this VIP PPE contract things, where friends and associates and donors to the Conservative Party were getting these massive, juicy contracts, war profiteering off the back of an absolutely horrific pandemic. And it's not good enough to say decisions were being taken
They were taken very quickly, and they
it was an
things had to be
absolute
delivered.
a time in this country did not have a lot of money, and you've got people creaming off the fat of these lucrative
But what would you have
contracts.
done?
Well, I would not have done. I would
What would you have
basically
done?
not been
Okay,
given
you
contracts.
said what you wouldn't do, but what would you have done?
I would not have done what you guys did.
Okay, but what would you have done?
I would have had a proper
It's very
procurement-
easy
a proper
looking back,
procurement
but
process.
then it might have slowed
and what
everything
you
down.
would not have done
It might
is
have
just
slowed
given
everything
contracts
down.
to your mates that didn't have any expertise in this field.
So the government had to deliver very quickly, and most actually of the contracts did deliver on time, and they did fulfil their obligations. In Baroness Mone's case, that didn't happen, and they've been sued, and she has to pay back the money. I think that's fair.